Welcome to Ecclesia Principles, a biblical strategy for believers to engage in God's design for government with Ray Eppard.
Glad to have you again today. We talked a little bit yesterday about how, if you would, things aren't working. We're supposed to be salt, we're supposed to be preservative, and things seem to be getting worse. We all know on the inside that things aren't working. What we're doing is not having a positive impact on society collectively. With this, where I finished was, we have to understand the Ecclesia principles. As I began to look at some things, I had gotten into a little time of enjoying etymology, the study of the origin and development of words. And so one day I was in my office and I thought, I'm going to look and see how the word ecclesia developed into our English word church, and any transitions or things that could help me better understand it. So I went online, typed in church etymology, and very much to my surprise, I found out that the word church doesn't come from ecclesia. It actually comes from a Greek word, kriakon. Shocked me, because we all know, and I was under assumptions. I've went to Bible school. I've studied the Bible for decades. Every person in my life that I have ever heard read Matthew 16 and reference the Greek, it goes like this, Matthew 16:18. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And the word church is ecclesia. Well, the bottom line is the word church didn't come from ecclesia. So then I went to look up what word came from ecclesia. I found out that there are none. There is no word or phrase that has come from ecclesia. It doesn't exist. Matter of fact, if you would, ecclesia is a transliteration. Now, you say, what in the world is a transliteration? You take the word baptism or baptize. They basically took the Greek word and just made it into English. It's very similar to the same word. It's just pronounced a little bit differently, but there wasn't a corresponding word for that. So they transliterated it. They just carried it and made it into an English word. The word ecclesia is very much the same. There is not an English equivalent to ecclesia. Now on this, I understand. I was shocked when I saw this. I encourage you to do the same thing I did. Google, or whatever search engine you want to use, the etymology of the word church. You will find it does not come from ecclesia. You say, well, why did they put that there? I'm not going to get into people's motives and things. I just want to deal with the facts, the results. The word ecclesia doesn't translate into English. It's just ecclesia. Now, every time you see the word church in the New Testament, that the word ecclesia is what's there in the Greek. It was, if you would, they translated it church, even though it came from a different word. But I began to think, all right, well, what did the word ecclesia mean when Jesus said it? When he's standing there talking to Peter, roughly close to 2,000 years ago now, and he said, on this rock I will build my ecclesia. What did Peter and the rest of the disciples hear? So I began to look for what the ancient meaning of the word ecclesia was. Because, and I'll just be honest with you, I first started with Bible dictionaries. And they will cite that the word ecclesia is a compound word. And it basically has two components in that sense, called out. Well, called and called out. In other words, it comes down to the called out ones. Out of and to call. Out of and to call. To call out of. So it comes to the called out ones. And I'm thinking, okay, the called out ones. Now, because of that, and because, if you would, it was Christianized, then most everything about that, all the commentaries, all the dictionaries, basically talk about how we use it. I couldn't find any that would go back to what the Greek word meant, how it was used in other places in the day of Jesus, because you lose some of these study books. They will say in other documents of the time, this word meant this. It was used in this way. None of the Bible dictionaries did that. It was just references to how we used it, what certain scriptures meant accordingly. And I'm thinking, where's the historical reference to this? So I began to look for it, and I went to a secular Greek dictionary. And in that, I found out that the word ecclesia didn't mean a called out, separated group, like a church service. It didn't mean that at all in Jesus' day. And just think about it. Just think about it for a second. You know, Jesus was a descendant of Abraham. He was Jewish. At this time, Jesus could have easily said something like this: "On this rock I will build my temple." A temple is a sacred place. He could have even said, "On this rock I'll build my synagogue." The word synagogue means a bringing together or a gathering, according to W. Vine's dictionary. Now, that's really the usage that we tend to apply to it, that it's a gathering of Christians. It's a gathering of believers. But Jesus didn't say, "On this rock I'll build a temple, on this rock I'll build my synagogue." Now, if you look at a number of different translations of Matthew 16:18, outside of church, there are two primary words that are inserted there, that are translated. They will be either assembly or community. Because ultimately the word ecclesia does have to do with an assembly that is related to a community. In that, if you go back to it, you will find that, again, it's a Greek word. It's a Greek term. It's actually a part of the Greek political system. You know, here in Virginia, we have what is known as the General Assembly. The General Assembly. And that's those who have been elected, and they go to Richmond at appointed times, and there they vote. They are the ones, as a matter of fact, I've been to the General Assembly, and there's a point in time where they will say that anyone who's not a part of the assembly has to leave the floor. Because what they're getting ready to do there is they're getting ready to conduct business. They're going to take votes. And if you're not a part of that assembly, you haven't been called there to vote. See, those representatives have been called out of the general population to the General Assembly because they have been selected to be the ones who vote. That is the basic meaning of ecclesia in the day that Jesus used it. It was initially, if you look at Merriam-Webster, he calls it a political assembly of citizens of the ancient Greek city-states. You see, those who had the right to vote would go, at that time primarily, to the gates of the city. Now, that'll become important later. They would go to the gates of the city. If you read throughout the Old Testament, in Israel, the elders would go to the gate of the city. Those elders, if you would, it was the ruling council. It was the ruling assembly. They would go to the gates of the city to conduct their business. Ecclesia was a political assembly of citizens of the Greek city-states. According to yourdictionary.com, it uses this definition: the public legislative assembly of Athens. That's where it started. It started in Athens. And it was their legislative assembly where they would pass laws. They would make decisions for that city-state. You see, in ancient Greece, it identified a group of individuals who would assemble regularly to vote on matters of civil policy. Now, if you would, let me use a little different definition here that would be a little bit more modernized. Because you see, when Jesus spoke, "On this rock I will build my ecclesia," this was the only definition that anybody knew about at that time. They didn't know of any other framework. They just knew of the Greek city-states. The Romans had adopted it and tweaked it a little bit. But if you would, what Jesus is really saying is that he's going to have an assembly. He's going to have a community. He's going to have a group of people who are going to influence culture. You see, those people would vote and determine policy. Policies end up determining culture. If you don't think so, look at a lot of things that have been passed in political assemblies the last 2 years that have impacted greatly the moral fabric of our nation and our communities. Jesus said that he's going to have a group of people who will impact. I'm not saying you got to run for office. I'm not saying I'm not advocating for another Holy Roman Empire. That's wrong. I am for separation of church and state, understood properly. But the ecclesia is to impact the culture of the country, the community. It is to be the salt that is the preservative. It is to be the light. There's so much that when we understand this, it'll bring clarity. God bless you. Join us again tomorrow.
You've been listening to Ecclesia Principles with Ray Eppert. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook at Liberty Justice HQ and online at libertyjusticehq.com. This program was brought to you by Victory Worship Center. Services Sunday at 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock a.m. 200 Hammond Lane, Stanton, Virginia.